Wait, I need to tell you something important. Please, just listen for a moment.
Hello, friends, again. Welcome back to Shadows of Revenge. This is a true story, so don't miss end. And first at all, tell me, where are you watching from the world? MYY name is Richard Hale. The first time Marcus brought Lisa home, the house felt colder. Not physically, nothing as obvious as that, but in a way that settled in the chest, the way instinct tightens before the mind catches up. She stepped through the doorway wearing a flawless smile, posture straight, eyes bright, every detail of her appearance curated like she was walking into a boardroom instead of meeting her future husband's father. She shook my hand with practiced warmth. Firm grip, perfect eye contact, a compliment ready within seconds. Too ready. I remember thinking, this woman has rehearsed this moment. Marcus, my son, stood beside her glowing with a pride I hadn't seen since he sold his first company contract. He looked at her like she was the proof that all his sacrifices had been worth it. Long nights, missed holidays, a decade of choosing spreadsheets over sleep. Lisa, to him, was the reward. To me, she was a question mark wrapped in designer fabric. She talked easily, confidently, asked about my health, about my wife, God rest her soul, still alive then, still laughing in the kitchen that night. Lisa listened attentively, nodding at the right moments, responding with sympathy measured to the exact degree expected. Nothing too emotional, nothing too shallow. But within the first hour, her curiosity shifted. Not to Marcus's childhood stories, not to his values or the things that made him who he was, to his business. So Marcus told me a little about the firm, she said lightly, swirling wine in her glass. Tech consulting, right? How big is the team now? Marcus answered proudly. 30 employees. Growing fast. Her eyebrows lifted just a fraction. Interest sharpened. And the clients, she asked. Mostly local or national. Marcus leaned in, eager to explain. I watched her listen, not to him but through him, like she was cataloging data, filing numbers away. By the time dinner ended, she knew how long his company had existed, how fast it was expanding, what kind of contract he landed, and roughly how valuable it was. She never asked how he handled stress, never asked what he loved outside of work, just how high the ladder went, and how quickly it was rising. I told myself I was being cynical, old, protective, that maybe I'd forgotten how modern relationships worked. But when she hugged me goodbye, her perfume lingering long after the door closed, the unease stayed. Marcus was 32 then, brilliant, driven, kind to a fault, and painfully inexperienced with love. He'd spent his 20s building something from nothing, pouring everything into a business that slowly, stubbornly grew. He didn't date much, didn't have time, didn't want distractions. Lisa was his first serious relationship, the first woman who made him feel seen, admired, chosen. They were engaged 6 months later. 6 months. I remember sitting across from him at the kitchen table when he told me, excitement barely contained. He talked about destiny, about knowing when you know, about how Lisa understood him like no one else ever had. I asked him, gently, if he thought it was fast. His smile faded instantly. Dad, he said, defensive. You don't even know her. That was the problem. Neither did he. I asked if they'd talked about money, expectations, boundaries. He laughed it off, said I worried too much, said I didn't trust anyone he dated. And maybe that was true. But 40 years of marriage teaches you something about people, about patience, about the difference between love that grows and love that grabs. The wedding was everything Lisa wanted. 200 guests, a venue that looked like it belonged in a magazine, flowers flown in, food that cost more per plate than my first car. Marcus paid for all of it without hesitation. He said it made her happy. That was enough for him. I stood in my suit that day watching my son say vows, smiling for photos, while every instinct I had screamed that he was stepping into something carefully disguised. Lisa cried during the ceremony. Perfect tears. Controlled. Photogenic. I prayed I was wrong. After the honeymoon, the pressure began. It started small, subtle, suggestions disguised as dreams. The house they lived in, 3 bedrooms, quiet neighborhood, suddenly felt insufficient. Lisa wanted space, prestige, a place that matched their future. Marcus hesitated, ran numbers, worried about liquidity. She smiled and reminded him how hard he worked, how he deserved more. He bought a mansion 8 months later. Then came the renovations. Perfectly good rooms torn apart, designers flown in, custom furniture replacing furniture that had barely been used. A kitchen remodeled not because it was outdated, but because it wasn't extravagant enough. $300,000 vanished into marble and lighting fixtures. Lisa never noticed. Or rather, she noticed, but not as a cost. To her, money wasn't earned. It was accessed. The Mercedes came next. The Toyota she'd driven before marriage suddenly embarrassed her. It didn't fit the image. Marcus bought the upgrade. $90,000, no argument. Vacations followed. Paris, London, Dubai, 5-star hotels, first-class flights, shopping sprees that cost more than some people's annual salaries. Marcus funded it all. He worked longer hours, came home later, lost weight, developed a cough that never quite went away. His eyes darkened with exhaustion, but when I asked him if he was okay, he always smiled. Just busy, Dad. This is what success looks like. Lisa, meanwhile, flourished. She quit her job immediately after the wedding. Said she wanted to focus on being a wife, on creating a beautiful home. But the home was maintained by staff. The meals cooked by a chef. The cleaning done by hired hands. Lisa's days were filled with gyms, spas, lunches, and social media posts that showcased a life of effortless luxury. She contributed nothing but presence. And slowly, methodically, she began to remove Marcus from everyone else. Dinners were canceled, visits postponed, friends described as beneath them. His college buddies stopped coming around. Family gatherings were skipped for vague reasons that never quite added up. Marcus didn't see it happening. Isolation rarely feels like isolation when it's framed as growth. By the time my wife passed, Marcus insisted I move into the guest house on his property. He didn't want me alone, so the space was empty anyway. From my bedroom window, I could see the main house, the driveway, the quiet rhythm of their lives. I watched my son leave before sunrise, return long after dark. I watched Lisa's car come and go during the day. I watched the lights go out at night. I thought that was where the story ended. A marriage strained by greed. A son too tired to see the damage. I didn't yet know that the nights held a different truth. One that moved silently. Precisely. At 2:14 in the morning. And the woman who smiled too perfectly was only just beginning to reveal what she really was. Some instincts don't fade with age. They sharpen. And soon, mine would demand to be obeyed. Insomnia is a cruel companion in old age. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It simply settles in your bones and refuses to let go, leaving you awake in a world that has already gone dark. That night, 3 weeks after I moved into the guest house, sleep abandoned me entirely. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of electricity, the distant ticking of a clock that felt louder with every passing minute. By midnight, I gave up. I made tea, sat in the dim light of my bedroom, tried reading, though the words slipped through my mind without meaning. The house beyond my window was still. Marcus's house, my son's house, a place I believed, until then, was filled with nothing more dangerous than stress and exhaustion. At 2:14 a.m., the silence broke. The sound was faint, a low mechanical cough, an engine turning over. I froze. From my window, I could see the driveway clearly. Moonlight spilled over the pavement in pale streaks. And there, moving slowly, deliberately, was Lisa's Mercedes, backing out, without headlights. For a moment, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. The car rolled backward in near total darkness, guided only by faint reflections and memory. Whoever was behind the wheel knew exactly what they were doing, knew exactly how much light would give them away. The car reached the street. Only then did the headlights click on. White light sliced through the night, and the Mercedes pulled away, disappearing down the road as if nothing had happened at all. I checked my watch. 2:14 a.m. I stood there long after she vanished, my tea growing cold in my hand. My first instinct was to rationalize. Emergency. Insomnia. A late-night errand. Anything normal enough to explain why a woman would sneak out of her house in the dead of night. But there was nothing normal about leaving without headlights. That wasn't carelessness. That was caution. I waited. 10 minutes. 30. An hour. She didn't return. Eventually, fatigue dragged me back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The imagery played behind my eyelids. Dark driveway, silent car. Light withheld until safety was assured. When morning arrived, everything looked ordinary. The Mercedes sat in the driveway as if it had never moved. Lisa moved through the house casually. Marcus drank his coffee, unaware that his wife had vanished while he slept. I said nothing. One night could be coincidence. 3 nights later, it happened again. Another sleepless night. Another restless mind. And at precisely 2:14 a.m., the Mercedes crept backward like a thief afraid of being seen. Headlights off. Then on. Then gone. My stomach tightened. Patterns don't lie. People do. I started watching. Not obsessively at first. Just paying attention. Staying up a little later. Sitting by the window longer than necessary. The third time confirmed it. Same movement. Same time. Same silence. 2:14. By the fourth time, fear replaced doubt. This wasn't random. This wasn't insomnia. This wasn't an emergency. This was a schedule. I began to notice what nights it didn't happen. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Clockwork. Always 2 hours. Always back at 4:14 a.m. And always, those headlights staying dark until the street was reached. I felt like I was watching a ritual. Something practiced. Perfected. Marcus slept through it all. His work had drained him to the point where night became nothing more than unconsciousness. He collapsed into bed and vanished from the world until morning. He had no idea his wife slipped from beside him like a ghost 3 nights a week. The guilt started to eat at me. Was I spying? Was this my business? What kind of father watches his son's house in the middle of the night? But another question pressed harder. What kind of father looks away? I considered telling Marcus after the second week. But how would that conversation go? I imagined his face closing off, his defenses rising. I imagined him accusing me of suspicion, of interference, of never trusting his wife. Without proof, I would only become the villain. So I waited. I started setting alarms. At 1:30 a.m., my phone would buzz softly. I'd rise quietly, move to the window, and wait. Some nights, nothing happened, and I felt foolish, an old man chasing shadows. Then Tuesday would come. 2:14. Headlights off. Gone. Every time, my chest tightened, as if something inside me was bracing for impact. By the end of the second week, denial was no longer possible. No innocent errand requires secrecy. No loving spouse sneaks out like a criminal. And no pattern this precise exists without intent. I began asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Was she cheating? The thought made my skin crawl. Not just because of the betrayal, but because of the cruelty of it. Marcus worked himself into the ground every day. He funded her lifestyle. He trusted her completely, and she repaid him by disappearing into the night. Still, I needed certainty. Observation wasn't enough. I needed to know where she was going. The decision weighed heavily on me. Following someone feels wrong, dirty, like crossing a line that can't be uncrossed. But every instinct I told me the real wrong had already been done, and was continuing unchecked. So I planned. I filled my truck with gas, charged my phone, parked on the street instead of behind the guest house. I chose dark clothing, quiet shoes. Thursday night, I went to bed early, though sleep never came. My alarm went off at 1:30, and I rose with a clarity that surprised me. Fear sharpened focus. At 2 o'clock, she moved. At 2:14, she passed me. I waited 10 seconds, then 15. Then I followed. The roads were empty. Street lights flickered past like silent witnesses. Her taillight stayed just ahead, steady and confident. She wasn't cautious once she was away from the house. She wasn't afraid. That told me more than I wanted to know. She turned toward downtown, toward life, toward secrets. My hands tightened on the wheel. Whatever waited at the end of that drive was going to change my son's life forever. and I was powerless to stop it until I saw it with my own eyes. Some truths don't announce themselves. They let you follow them all the way to the point where turning back is no longer possible. The city looks different at 2 in the morning. Not empty, just stripped of its disguises. Storefronts dark. Traffic lights cycling for no one. Buildings standing like silent observers to the lives unfolding behind their walls. As I followed Lisa through the sleeping streets, I realized how confident she was. No hesitation, no wrong turns. She wasn't searching for a place. She was returning to it. 15 minutes after leaving the house, she slowed and turned into an upscale apartment complex near downtown. Glass and concrete. Modern. Expensive. The kind of place people lived when they wanted privacy without obscurity. She pulled into guest parking. I stopped on the street, engine off, lights dark. From where I sat, I could see her clearly. She stepped out of the Mercedes and paused, scanning the lot. Not casually, deliberately, making sure she hadn't been followed. My breath caught. She was careful. That meant this mattered. Lisa adjusted her jacket and walked toward one of the buildings with the ease of someone who had done this many times before. No hesitation. No checking numbers. She knew exactly where she was going. I waited, counted my breaths. Then I stepped out of the truck. The night air felt heavier up close, thick with the hum of distant traffic and the faint buzz of security lights. I moved slowly, keeping to shadows, feeling ridiculous and terrified all at once. Every step felt like trespassing, not just on property, but on truth. She stopped at a ground floor unit. Knocked twice. Not random. Not tentative. A signal. The door opened almost immediately. A man stood there. 40s maybe. Well-groomed. Relaxed. Awake in the way people are when they've been expecting company. He smiled when he saw her. Not surprised. Not curious. Familiar. He stepped aside, and Lisa slipped inside. The door closed. That sound, the soft click of a latch, landed like a gunshot in my chest. For a moment, I couldn't move. This was no misunderstanding. No late-night errand. No harmless secret. This was betrayal in its simplest form. I should have left then. Should have gone home and told Marcus what I'd seen. But something held me there. A pressure behind the ribs. A sense that the truth wasn't finished yet. I walked closer. The building was quiet. Thin walls. Modern construction. I found the door she'd entered and stood just close enough to hear voices through the wood. At first, they were muffled. 2 people talking comfortably, casually. A man's voice. Lisa's voice. Then laughter. Not the polite, controlled laugh she used in public. Not the one she offered Marcus at dinner parties. This was different. Loose. Genuine. Unguarded. It hurt more than I expected. I leaned in slightly. The man said something about being glad she could make it. Lisa replied easily, like this was routine. Like she hadn't slipped out of a marriage to be here. Just stepped out for coffee. Then he spoke again. Did you finish moving the funds like we discussed? The words sliced through me. Funds. My hand went cold. This wasn't just an affair. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands suddenly unsteady. I opened the recording app and pressed record, holding the device as close to the door as I dared. Lisa answered, her voice clear enough now to freeze my blood. Yes, another 100,000 this week. We're getting close. Once we hit 2 million in the offshore account, we can initiate the divorce and disappear before Marcus realizes what's missing. I had to press my forehead against the door to stay upright. 2 million. Offshore account. Divorce. Disappear. This wasn't betrayal. This was execution. The man spoke again, calm and methodical. Good. We keep the transfer small. No alarms. 3 more weeks, and we're done. Costa Rica is ready. I recognized the voice then. Derek Chun, Marcus's CFO. The man my son trusted with every financial artery of the company he'd built with his own hands. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, but completely. I stayed there, recording, as their voices continued. They spoke freely, confidently, like criminals who believed the world was already conquered. Derek explained how easy it had been. Fake vendors, consulting fees, shell accounts, small amounts siphoned consistently over 18 months. Enough to build a fortune without triggering audits. Lisa laughed. I can't believe how trusting he is, she said. He never questions anything. He's always tired. Always working. He doesn't even look at the accounts anymore. They mocked him. My son. The man who worked 14-hour days to fund the very life that was destroying him. They talked about passwords. Documents. How Lisa photographed paperwork for Marcus's home office. How she watched him type his logins. How she handed access to Derek like a gift. Partners. Not lovers. Predators. They spoke of fake identities. New names. Property purchased under aliases. Passports already prepared. Plane tickets booked 3 weeks out. They planned everything. Everything. I stood there for nearly 40 minutes, my phone pressed against the door, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid they'd hear it. Sweat soaked my collar. My legs ached from standing still. I wanted to scream, to burst through the door, to drag them into the light and make them face what they were doing. But rage doesn't save anyone. Evidence does. When their voices drifted toward the bedroom, when intimacy replaced strategy, I stepped back. I had what I needed. I walked back to my truck in a daze, the city lights blurring as tears burned my eyes. I sat behind the wheel and listened to the recording through my headphones, making sure every word was there. It was every confession, every plan, every cruel laugh. By the time I drove home, dawn was creeping into the sky. Marcus was still asleep. I wasn't. At 7 a.m., I knocked on his kitchen door. He looked surprised to see me. Concerned. Asked if I was okay. I told him to sit down. I told him to listen. And when the recording played, when his wife's voice filled the room alongside his CFO's, something fundamental left his eyes. Trust doesn't shatter loudly. It collapses inward. He didn't speak for a long time after it ended. Just stared at the table, at the phone, at the life he thought he had. Then he cried. Not loudly. Quietly. The kind of crying that comes from realizing the ground beneath you is never solid at all. What followed happened fast. Lawyers. Police. Forensic accountants. Arrests made before sunset. Handcuffs where wedding rings once were. Lisa didn't look powerful anymore. Derek didn't look clever. They looked small. Marcus lost a marriage that day. But he kept his future. And they lost everything they thought they were stealing. Some doors are never meant to be opened. But if I hadn't stood outside that one, my son would have lost his life without ever knowing who took it. The house felt hollow after that morning. Not quiet. Hollow. Like something essential had been removed from the walls themselves. Marcus sat at the kitchen table long after the recording ended, hands wrapped around a mug he never lifted, eyes fixed on a place just beyond the surface of the wood. He wasn't seeing the table. He wasn't seeing me. He was replaying 18 months of his life through a new lens. Every late night at work. Every time Lisa said she missed him. Every purchase justified as just this once. Every smile that now felt counterfeit. Trust, once broken, doesn't crack in half. It fractures into 1,000 memories, and every one of them cuts. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice sounded older than his years. Call my lawyer, he said quietly. That was the moment grief gave way to resolve. By mid-morning, the kitchen filled with strangers who would decide the fate of everything Marcus had built. His corporate attorney arrived first, face tightening as the recording played. Then a forensic accountant. Then a detective from the financial crimes unit. Each listened in silence. No one questioned the authenticity. No one doubted the voices. No one underestimated the scale. This wasn't a messy divorce. This wasn't workplace misconduct. This was a coordinated financial assassination. The forensic accountant moved fast. Laptop open. Systems accessed. Numbers pulled apart with surgical precision. And just like Derek had bragged, the pattern emerged quickly. Fake vendors. Shell invoices. Money bleeding out in amounts small enough to stay invisible until added together. By noon, the estimate stood at $1.7 million stolen. 18 months. Marcus's hands shook as he signed access permissions, the reality settling in deeper with every confirmation. His company, his life's work, had been treated like an unlocked vault by the two people he trusted most. The detective made calls. Quiet ones. Efficient ones. Arrest warrants moved faster than Lisa or Derek could imagine. Marcus asked one question that day. Can we stop them before they leave? The answer was yes, but only because of one night. One door. One decision not to look away. The arrests happened that evening. Derek was taken first, pulled from the same apartment where he thought he was untouchable. Lisa was arrested at the mansion she'd renovated, the home she believed would be hers forever. She didn't see Marcus. He refused to be there. I watched from the side as they let her out. No makeup, no confidence, no perfect smile, just fear. The months that followed were brutal, but necessary. Courtrooms, depositions, financial audits that peeled back every layer of the scheme. Offshore accounts frozen, fake identities exposed. A Costa Rican property seized before it ever saw its new owners. The truth moved like fire once it was lit. Derek took a plea deal. 7 years in federal prison. Lisa followed. 5 years. The money, most of it, was recovered. Enough to save the company. Enough to keep 30 innocent employees from losing their jobs. Enough to give Marcus a future again. But no recovery restores trust. Marcus changed after that. He still worked hard. Still built. Still believed in effort. But the softness, the unquestioning faith in people, that never fully returned. And maybe that was the cost of survival. Sometimes, losing innocence is the price of keeping everything else. Marcus thanked me more times than I could count, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a father who arrived just in time. Because the most terrifying truth of all wasn't what Lisa and Dara planned to do. It was how close they came to succeeding. 3 more weeks. That was all it would have taken. 3 more weeks, and my son would have woken up to an empty house, a drained company, and a life erased by people who once slept beside him and worked beside him. Some betrayals don't come with warning signs. Others whisper, softly, at 2:14 in the morning. And if you're brave enough to listen, you just might save someone before the darkness finishes its work. If this story reached you late at night, early in the morning, or at a moment when trust feels fragile, tell me where you're listening from. And remember, sometimes the truth hides in silence, waiting for someone willing to watch.